wind had teeth, and it chewed on the stagecoach like it wanted to rip it apart. Ella Hart pressed her back to the shaking wall, her gloved hand locked around a leather strap, trying not to let fear show on her face. Outside the grimy window, Wyoming had turned into a swirling storm of dust and grit. The Bighorn Mountains were only faint shapes in the distance, like ghosts watching her arrive. Dusty Ford was not welcoming her. It was warning her. Ella told herself she came for a clean beginning. A town where her name meant nothing but schoolteacher and telegraph operator. A place where the past could stay locked away in her chest, quiet and untouched. She was 24, but she carried tiredness that felt older than the land. Her life had been made of leaving. This time, she prayed, she would finally stay. She would build something honest. The crash came so fast, she barely had time to breathe. The coach lurched hard, a woman screamed, and a small boy tumbled into the aisle with terror in his eyes. The whole world tilted like it had lost its balance. Wood groaned. The axle snapped with a sharp crack, and then everything turned sideways. People, luggage, and bodies slammed together in a burst of chaos. The coach hit the ground with a heavy thud that rattled Ella's teeth. Then the noise stopped. Silence filled the air, thick with dust, broken only by muffled crying. Ella pushed herself up, her bonnet crooked, her ears ringing. The door had become the ceiling. In the tight space, she spotted the boy trapped in the aisle, his leg pinned under a heavy wooden crate. His mother clawed at it, sobbing, but the weight would not move. Then a shadow filled the shattered window frame. A man appeared like he had stepped out of the storm itself. He pried the broken door open with calm strength and dropped into the overturned coach without wasting a word. He was tall and dust-covered, dressed in worn denim and leather, his movements quick and controlled. His eyes were a cool gray, steady and unreadable. He looked once at the wreckage, once at the trapped boy, and then he spoke in a low voice that carried even through panic. He told the mother to step back. He set his shoulder against the crate, muscles tightening under his sleeves, and he shifted it just enough for Ella to slip forward. "I've got him," Ella said, surprising herself with how steady she sounded. She eased the boy's leg free, whispering gentle nonsense to keep him calm while he cried. The man held the weight as if it was nothing but stubborn wood. When the child was clear, he lowered the crate with a controlled thud, helped the mother and son out into the wind, then turned back and offered Ella his hand. His palm was rough, calloused, and strong. Ella took it, and he pulled her up into the stinging air. She managed to say thank you, but he only gave a short nod. His attention was already elsewhere, scanning the open prairie like he was listening for danger no one else could hear. He was silence made into a man, the kind that did not invite questions. Dusty Ford appeared through the storm like a town that had been built in a hurry and left to fight for its life. One muddy street cut across the prairie, lined with raw timber buildings hunched against the wind. A general store, a saloon, a smithy, a sheriff's office. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, thin and lonely, like a small thread of hope tugging at the wide, empty sky. Ella held onto that sound as she made her way into town. She found warmth at Martha Lee's eatery, where the smell of coffee and roasting beef wrapped around her like a blanket. Martha was a widow with sharp eyes and strong hands, the kind of woman who ran her world with firm sense and no wasted softness. She guided Ella to a table near the fire, spoke to her like she belonged there, and offered her a clean room upstairs. When Ella introduced herself as the new teacher, Martha's face softened like she had been waiting a long time to hear those words. That warmth did not last long. The doorbell jingled, and a man walked in as if he owned the air. He was large, dressed in fine wool, his smile wide but empty. His eyes were small, shrewd, and hungry in a quiet way. He introduced himself as Ephraim Briggs, the owner of the Mercantile, and he spoke to Ella with polished charm that felt too smooth to trust. He offered help, supplies, comfort, and support, but every word felt like a hook wrapped in honey. Ella answered politely, briefly, and kept her distance. She had not come this far to owe anyone. Days passed, and Ella built a routine that kept her standing on her own feet. She taught children in the mornings in an old, cleaned-out saloon, and she worked the telegraph in the afternoons and evenings at the post office. The clicking key became her steady companion, connecting her to places far beyond Wyoming dust. She kept her life small and careful, watching the town's quiet currents, learning who spoke with truth and who spoke with hidden aims. She saw the silent man again, always at a distance, usually near the livery, always moving with that same contained purpose. She did not know his name yet, only that he carried something heavy inside him, a past like a closed fist. One night, when the cold laid frost across the street and the town slept under the wind, the telegraph key snapped to life. The sharp clicks startled Ella so badly her breath caught. The message came from an army outpost, a warning for the territory. Ella's fingers moved fast as she wrote it down, but her skin went cold as the meaning sank in. Coyote Riders. Silver Mesa Ranch targeted tonight. Proceed with caution. Silver Mesa was his place. The silent man's place. Ella grabbed her shawl, locked up, and hurried through the dark to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Amos Pike opened the door in tired clothes, read the message, and muttered a curse like he had said it too many times before. Then the door creaked again. The silent man stood there, hat in hand, catching the words like a blade. His calm vanished. His eyes turned hard, focused, and dangerous. He did not ask questions. He did not wait for orders. He met Ella's gaze for one quick heartbeat, understood the source of the warning, and then he turned and left. A moment later, Ella heard hoofbeats tearing out of town into the night. Sheriff Pike pulled on his boots, jaw tight, and said the man was a force of nature. Ella walked back toward the post office with a fear that felt deeper than winter. She had done her duty. Still, she could not shake the thought of him riding alone into darkness. When she reached her office, the weak lamplight spilled onto the mud outside her window, and there, clear as a confession, were fresh boot prints. They were not hers. They were not the old postmaster's. They were deep, heavy prints, as if someone had stood there for a while, listening to the telegraph speak. Ella's stomach tightened. Someone else in Dusty Ford knew about the warning. Someone had been close enough to hear it before she ever reached the sheriff. There was a spy in town, and Ella had no idea who was watching her now. Cole McKinnon rode like the wind was chasing him. Snowflakes hit his face and melted fast, but he barely noticed. The warning from the telegraph had lit something cold inside him, the same feeling he tried to bury when he left Texas and the cavalry behind. Silver Mesa was supposed to be quiet ground, a place where a man could work, sleep, and keep to himself. But the Coyote Riders did not care what a man wanted. They came for what he had. When he reached the ranch yard, he slid off his horse and walked into the bunkhouse without knocking. The cowhands woke fast when they saw his face. He did not yell. He did not panic. He said one sentence, low and firm, and it moved through the room like a command. Rustlers. West pasture. Men pulled on boots, grabbed rifles, checked cinches, and followed him into the night, like they trusted his eyes more than their own. They found the riders just where the message warned, shadows pushing a slice of the herd toward the hills. Snow softened the world and swallowed sound, turning the whole thing into a quiet nightmare. Cole lifted a hand and his men spread out. He told them to aim for mounts if they could. He wanted the thieves gone, not a field full of dead men. But once the first gunshot cracked, everything turned wild. Horses screamed, cattle surged, and the herd broke apart like water poured onto stone. Cole moved through the chaos with calm that felt almost cruel. His horse obeyed him like it understood the stakes. He fired twice, not to kill, but to spook a rustler's horse and throw the rider. Another cowboy downed a mount, and the rider hit the snow hard. Outnumbered and losing control of the cattle, the Coyote Riders broke and fled into the hills. They vanished into the storm, leaving only trampled snow and a few spent cartridges behind. An hour later, Sheriff Amos Pike arrived with a small posse, too late to catch ghosts. He looked at the mess, cursed, and praised Cole with tired respect. Back in town the next morning, Men talked loud in the saloon and the mercantile, using Cole's name like it was a shield against fear. Ella Hart heard those voices from a distance and felt both relieved and uneasy. Relief that the ranch was safe. Unease because she still saw those bootprints outside her window in her mind. The days that followed brought a new kind of trouble. Ella opened her classroom in the cleaned-out saloon, and children filled it with restless energy and sharp curiosity. She tried to bring order with patience, not force. She taught letters, numbers, and reading. She watched their faces light up when they understood something new. For the first time since arriving, she felt the edge of hope settle inside her like warm coals. Then the town showed its teeth in a quieter way. A well-dressed woman named Mrs. Gable entered the classroom one morning with her chin lifted like she came to inspect livestock. Her eyes moved to 3 poor children at the back, the O'Malley siblings, their clothes patched and their hands rough from chores. Mrs. Gable said her children would not sit in the same room with them. The words hit the air like a slap. Ella did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply told Mrs. Gable that every child in Dusty Ford was welcome in her classroom. She said the only improper thing was judging children by dust instead of heart. Mrs. Gable's face went red. She yanked her children from their seats and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to make the windows shake. The remaining children stared at Ella like they had never seen a grown woman refuse a powerful person before. That afternoon, Ephraim Briggs met Ella on the boardwalk, as if he had been waiting for the story to reach him. His smile was friendly, but it never touched his eyes. He offered her a better job, private tutoring for the town's best families, with better pay and cleaner rooms. It was not an offer, it was a test, a way to see if she could be bought, then controlled. Ella thanked him and refused. She said she came to teach the whole town, not a selected few. Briggs's smile tightened for one short moment, like a knot pulled too hard. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving behind words that sounded polite but carried a warning. Nobility does not keep the winter cold out. A few days later, Cole McKinnon waited for her at the edge of town. He stood by a fence post like he belonged there, quiet as a shadow. Over the fence rail lay a saddle. It was old but repaired, oiled, stitched, and lined fresh. It looked like something rescued instead of thrown away. "For you," Cole said. Ella stared at it, confused. Cole explained that it was a long walk to the O'Malley claim, and the livery had a gentle mare she could use, but she needed a saddle. Ella touched the leather and saw the careful work in every stitch. Someone had spent time on this. Someone had decided her comfort mattered. She tried to thank him, but words felt too small. She asked if she could buy him supper at Martha Lee's as payment. Cole hesitated like he had forgotten what it meant to be invited. Then he gave one slow nod. That night at Martha's, they sat in a warm corner while the eatery buzzed with life. Their conversation started stiff, careful, like 2 strangers walking on thin ice. Ella asked about the horses at Silver Mesa. Cole answered in short lines at first, but then his voice changed as he spoke about the animals. He talked about their habits, their temper, their loyalty. He sounded gentle without trying to be. Ella told him about the children and how hard it was to earn trust in a town full of pride. They did not speak of secrets, but the silence between them felt different now, less empty. 2 mornings later, Sheriff Pike rode out to search the old rustler ground again. He walked the snow like a man reading a story written in tracks. Near a cluster of junipers, he found a torn envelope half buried in mud and slush. He wiped it clean and saw the embossed seal, Briggs's Mercantile and Land Office. Pike stared at it long enough for the wind to bite his face red. The next week, a thunderstorm rolled in, loud and dry, throwing lightning across the prairie like angry hands. Ella dismissed her students early. Minutes later, a blinding strike hit the grass east of town, and smoke curled into the sky. The wind grabbed that smoke and fed it. In less time than it took to pray, fire became a roaring wall charging toward Silver Mesa. The church bell clanged fast and frantic. Fire. Men ran for shovels. Women ran for buckets. Martha Lee organized the line with a voice that cut through panic. Ella joined the bucket brigade without thinking, her hands raw from rough handles, her lungs burning with smoke. The fire roared like a living beast. Embers rained down. Heat pressed against skin. Through smoke and chaos, Ella saw Cole driving a plow team hard, cutting a desperate fire break. His face was set like stone. He was not fighting flames with prayers. He was fighting with earth and will. In the frantic movement, Ella's small cloth satchel slipped from her belt and fell into the mud near the creek. She did not notice. She did not feel it leave. But it was the one thing she could not afford to lose. The fire reached the break and tried to jump it. People shouted. Buckets flew. Water soaked the barn roof. Finally, the flames rolled past the buildings and burned out against rocky ground, leaving black scars and exhausted bodies behind. Relief rose in a ragged cheer that died quickly when someone screamed for a missing child. A little boy had wandered into the stable, trapped in smoke and fear. Cole found the door cracked open and ran in. Ella followed, her heart hammering. The roof timbers fell, blocking Cole's path. Ella called the boy's name, using her calm teacher voice like a rope to pull him through terror. She told him to curl up and stay still. Cole soaked a blanket, pushed through flame, wrapped the child, then shouted for help through the back wall. Ella ran outside and threw her shoulder into a weak board until other hands joined hers. The wall broke. The boy was passed out, coughing and crying, into his father's arms. Cole climbed out after him, his hair singed, his arms scorched, his eyes sharp with pain he refused to show. When the smoke cleared and people began to clean up, Ella realized her satchel was gone. Panic hit her so hard she nearly swayed. She searched the trampled mud near the creek. She searched again. The bag was nowhere. Cole found it later near a willow root, stained with mud. The drawstring had come loose, and a paper stuck halfway out. His hand moved to tuck it back, and his eyes caught the name at the top of the document. A birth record. Travis County, Texas. Ella's name. And the father's name printed clear as a gunshot. John Blackjack Corian. Cole went still. He knew that name. Men had whispered it in Texas saloons like it was a curse. He stood by the creek with the bag in his hand, the sunset turning the smoke-filled sky red. He could give it back and pretend he saw nothing. Or he could admit the truth and risk shattering the fragile trust forming between them. While he stood there, a lone rider watched Dusty Ford from a distant bluff, a blue bandana at his neck. And this time, the Coyote Riders were not watching cattle. They were watching Ella. The days after the fire felt strange in Dusty Ford. The air still carried the bitter smell of burned grass, and people spoke softer, like they did not want to wake the trouble sleeping under the ashes. Ella tried to return to normal. She taught her lessons, she worked the telegraph, and she kept her face calm. But inside, she felt exposed. Her satchel was missing, and it was not just a bag. It was her past in cloth and paper. Without it, she felt like the wind could peel her life open for anyone to read. One evening, as the sky turned purple and the street emptied for supper, Ella took a shortcut through the narrow alley between the smithy and the livery. The shadows were deep there, and the cold sat low on the ground. A figure stepped out ahead of her, tall in a long, dark duster coat. His hat was pulled low, and a bandana covered the lower half of his face. When he spoke, his voice was rough and certain, like he had practiced saying her name. He called her Miss Hart. Ella froze. Her hand rose to her throat without thinking. The man took a slow step closer, and she noticed something that made her skin tighten. He had a slight limp, a hitch in his stride that looked like an old injury that never healed right. He told her he had a question about something she lost. Then he said Texas, and the air turned to ice. He spoke the name Blackjack Corian like it was bait tossed into water. He suggested the letter in her satchel might say where to find something valuable, something left behind. Ella tried to deny it, but her voice came out thin. Before the man could move closer, another shadow filled the mouth of the alley behind her. Cole McKinnon stood there, silent and solid, like a wall built out of muscle and will. He did not draw a gun. He did not shout. He simply looked at the limping man with gray eyes that promised trouble without needing words. The man hesitated. Whatever he saw in Cole's stillness made him step back. He muttered that it would be another time, then disappeared into the shadows like smoke. Cole walked Ella out of the alley and back toward Martha Lee's eatery without touching her. He stayed close enough that she could breathe again. When he asked if she was all right, she nodded, but her fear had shifted into something sharper. Someone knew about her satchel. Someone knew enough to come looking for it. That meant her secrets were not safe in Dusty Ford. Not anymore. The next day, Sheriff Amos Pike visited Ephraim Briggs at the Mercantile. He set a torn, muddy envelope on the counter, the seal pressed into the flap clear as day. Briggs picked it up with mild curiosity, then smiled like the sheriff had brought him a child's lost mitten. He said he sent out dozens of papers each week, and he could not be blamed for where trash ended up. He spoke smoothly, then turned the whole thing around by suggesting the miners and drifters were the real problem. Pike left with his jaw tight and no proof strong enough to chain a rich man. Briggs watched him go with a smile that did not look kind. That night, a soft knock came at Ella's door above Martha's. When she opened it, Cole stood in the hallway with his hat in his hands. In his other hand, he held the small, mud-stained gray satchel. Ella's breath caught. She snatched it like it was air. Relief hit her so hard her knees almost went weak. Then Cole said he needed to tell her something, and the relief twisted into dread. He admitted the drawstring had been open. He admitted he had seen the name on the birth record inside. He told her he did not read the letter, but he saw the name John Corian. Ella stepped back, anger flaring hot and fast. She told him he had no right. Cole did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply said he was sorry, and he said a name like that carried danger. He reminded her of the man in the alley and said he did not want her facing that alone. The honesty in his voice broke something inside her. Ella sat down with the satchel clutched in her lap, staring at the floorboards like they might steady her. She told him the man who raised her was Daniel Hart, a farmer, a good man who died when she was young. She told him her mother remarried, and the second man was sweet when sober and cruel when drunk. She told Cole she ran at 16 and worked any job she could find. She taught herself to read better, learned telegraph work, and fought her way into a life she could respect. Then she took out her mother's letter and spoke about the truth her mother confessed before she died. Corian was her blood father, a ghost from before she was born, a name her mother hid because she wanted Ella to have a normal chance. Cole listened without interrupting. He did not try to fix her pain with easy words. He simply stood there as a witness, and that was its own kind of comfort. When Ella finished, the room felt quieter, like the wind outside had finally stopped pushing against the walls. The trust between them was bruised, but it did not die. It shifted into something deeper, because now they both knew what the other carried. A few days later, the telegraph clicked late at night with a message from the territorial capital. Ella copied it down and felt her stomach knot. An Army payroll stagecoach was due through Dusty Ford the next morning, heavily guarded, carrying gold and cash. To the Coyote Riders, it was not just a prize. It was an invitation. Ella did not wait. She found Cole and put the message in his hand. His eyes hardened as he read it, like water turning to ice. They went to Sheriff Pike together. Pike read the message and sighed like a man who had seen too many bad endings. Cole studied the map on the wall and spoke of Devil's Gap, a narrow place that made a perfect ambush. Ella suggested a false telegraph report, a reroute, bait for any spy listening to the wire. The plan formed fast, bold, and risky. Ella would send the lie. The real payroll coach would be hidden in town. Cole and his ranchmen would ride to Devil's Gap and wait for the riders to show themselves. The day before the coach arrived, the sky turned heavy and gray, and rain threatened in the distance. Cole took Ella behind the barn at Silver Mesa and placed a pistol in her hand. She admitted she had never held one. Cole said everyone should know how, and he showed her the grip and the aim with simple, careful instructions. His hands were rough, but his touch was respectful. He stood close only to guide her, not to claim her space. The first shots startled her, and she missed. Then she listened, breathed out, and squeezed the trigger the way he taught. The tin can jumped with a sharp ping, and Ella laughed before she could stop herself. Rain broke suddenly, turning dirt to mud in minutes. They ran into the hay barn, breathless, damp, and smiling at the small joy of it. Inside, the barn felt warm and private, lantern light flickering over stacked hay. Cole teased her with a low voice and the crooked smile, and Ella recognized the play in his eyes. The words were bold, but the meaning was gentle, like he was trying to make her laugh more than anything else. Then he grew serious and asked if he could hold her hand. That small question hit Ella harder than any flirting ever could. She gave him her hand, and he held it like it mattered. Cole kissed her then, slow and careful, giving her every chance to pull away. The kiss was brief, soft, and full of promise more than heat. When he pulled back, his voice sounded rough with emotion. He told her if they got through tomorrow, he would ask her to be his wife. Ella's heart hammered, but she did not feel trapped. She felt chosen. She told him they would get through it, and they stood in silence, holding hands while the rain drummed on the roof like a warning. The next morning, Ella sent the false message across the wire, tapping it out with steady fingers even though her stomach churned. She received a coded reply confirming it was received, and she knew the bait was in the water now. At Devil's Gap, Cole and his men waited among rocks, cold creeping into their bones. When the riders finally came, there were more than Ella hoped, their faces covered, their anger clear in how they rode. Leading them was the limping man in the long duster. Cole's whistle cut the air. His men rose from cover with rifles leveled, and the riders froze, caught in a trap they did not expect. They threw down weapons when warning shots cracked stone near their boots. Cole walked straight to the limping leader and disarmed him. Then he turned to another rider who stayed back, giving signals like he was used to command. Cole ordered him to show his face. The bandana came down, and the world changed in one breath. Sheriff Amos Pike sat there, eyes cold, mouth twisted with rage that did not belong to a lawman. Ella arrived at the mouth of the gap with a small posse just in time to see it, and her chest tightened like it might split. The man she trusted with her warning, the man who heard the plan, was the leader of the Coyote Riders. For a moment everything went silent, like even the wind held its breath. Then Pike shouted for his men to kill them all, and Devil's Gap erupted into gunfire. Cole's men dove back to cover. Shots screamed past rocks. Stone chips flew. Cole returned fire with controlled aim, trying to wound, not kill. But the fight did not care about vows. A bullet tore into Cole's left forearm, and he stumbled behind a boulder, face tight with pain. Ella watched, helpless for one sickening moment, then saw the supply wagon behind her and the signaling flares inside. She ran to it, grabbed the reins, and drove the wagon forward like a moving wall, blocking Pike's line of fire. She lit a flare and threw it toward the rustlers, horses. The light hissed bright and savage, and the horses panicked, breaking the enemy line into chaos. In the confusion, Ella whipped the wagon out of the gap and raced back to town, lungs burning, hands shaking, mind locked on one goal. She burst into the post office and tapped out a desperate call for help to Fort Laramie. She did not hear the door open behind her until a shadow fell across the desk. Sheriff Pike stood there, pistol aimed at her heart, mud on his boots, and hate in his eyes. Ephraim Briggs stepped in behind him, calm as a banker, smiling like he had been waiting for this moment. They spoke of the payroll and the livery, and Ella understood then that Briggs was not just a greedy man. He was part of the rot at the center of Dusty Ford. Ella's eyes flicked to the pot-bellied stove and the leaking kerosene can beside it. When shouting erupted outside and hoofbeats thundered close, she moved. She knocked the lamp from the desk and it shattered near the stove, fire whooshing up fast with thick smoke. Pike cursed and stumbled. Briggs coughed and backed away. Then, the door burst open, and Cole filled the frame, wounded arm tight to his side. Eyes locked on Pike. Cole hit Pike like a storm, knocked the pistol away, and forced him to the floor. He did not beat him. He tied him, fast and sure, with the hard justice of the range. Through the smoke, Briggs ran for the back door. But when it opened, Martha Lee stood there with townspeople behind her, faces hard, tools in their hands, and no fear left for rich men. When the smoke cleared and Pike and Briggs were dragged into the street, Dusty Ford gathered in a tight circle, breathing like one tired animal. Cole stood beside Ella, arm bandaged, face worn down by pain and relief. Pike spat on the ground and looked at the crowd with a cruel smile. He pointed his words at Cole like a knife. "You think he's a hero?" Pike shouted. "Ask him what he did in Texas. Ask him about the blood he spilled." The street went quiet, and every eye in Dusty Ford turned to Cole McKinnon. The words Sheriff Pike threw into the street did not fade. They sat there like smoke that would not clear, curling into every mind in Dusty Ford. People who had cheered Cole a day ago now looked at him with caution. Men who had once slapped his shoulder now held their distance. The town had just learned the law could be a liar, and that made everyone suspicious of any man who seemed too steady, too strong, too sure. Ella felt it like a cold weight in her chest. She stood beside Cole as Pike and Briggs were shoved into the jailhouse, and she watched the town's faces change. The betrayal had already bruised her, but this new doubt felt worse because it was aimed at the one person who had pulled her out of the storm again and again. 2 days later, a traveling circuit judge rolled into Dusty Ford in a dusty buggy. His name was Elias Miller, and his face looked carved by sun, wind, and hard decisions. He did not want a show. He wanted truth. He chose the church for the hearing because it was the only building big enough to hold the whole town, and because people still feared lies under a cross, even out here. The pews filled fast. Everyone came, rich and poor, proud and fearful, hungry to see how this ended. Briggs sat with a smooth lawyer at his side, his face still wearing that empty confidence like it was armor. Pike sat beside him with wrists chained, his eyes burning with hate. Cole and Ella sat alone on the front bench. Cole's arm was in a sling, but the heavier wound was the way the town watched him. The first part of the hearing moved quickly. One by one, the captured Coyote Riders turned on their leaders. They spoke about Briggs paying for information, paying for silence, paying for stolen cattle to be moved through the mercantile. They spoke about Pike being the shield that kept the law off them. The torn envelope with Briggs's seal was entered as evidence. Then the ledger found under the floorboard in Briggs's office was brought forward, thick and heavy, with neat records of bribes and deals. Even the judge's eyes hardened when he saw it. Briggs's lawyer tried to fight back the only way he could. He stood and pointed at Cole like a man pointing at a snake. He said Cole's testimony could not be trusted because Cole was violent. He said Cole ran from Texas. He said Pike's accusation proved Cole was dangerous and guilty of bloodshed. Judge Miller did not let the lawyer ramble. He turned his tired eyes to Cole and asked him straight if there was truth to it. Cole stood slowly. The church went quiet enough to hear the wind outside. Cole did not look at the lawyer. He looked at the townspeople, the faces he had worked beside, saved beside, and now might lose. "There was a shooting," Cole said. His voice was low, but every word landed. He said it happened years ago when he was a cavalry scout. He said his unit tracked outlaws who had taken a family hostage. He said they cornered them in a canyon, and in the fight, an outlaw used the father as a shield with a knife at his throat. Cole said there was no clean shot, no safe choice. He took the shot anyway. He said the outlaw went down and the farmer lived, but another man behind them also died in the chaos. The army called it necessary. Cole called it the moment that broke something in him. The lawyer smiled like he had been waiting for that. He declared Cole admitted killing. He demanded the town see Cole for what he was, a man who solved problems with bullets. Cole did not deny it. He only said he had lived with that choice every day since, and he came to Wyoming to stop living like violence was his only language. He sat down, pale under his tan, like the confession took more from him than the gunfight ever did. The church buzzed with whispers. Some people looked shaken. Some looked angry. Mrs. Gable's mouth tightened. A few men nodded like they always believed something dark hid behind Cole's quiet. Ella felt the danger of the moment, because now the truth was a weapon in the wrong hands. Then a man stood at the back of the church. He was a stranger in travel-worn clothes, with a woman and 2 children beside him. His voice was rough but steady, and he spoke like a man who had carried fear long enough to know it by smell. He introduced himself as Jacob Stroud. Then he said words that cut through the room like sunlight through cloud. He said he was the farmer from that canyon. He pointed at Cole and said Cole saved his family. He said the outlaw had a knife at his throat, and Cole took the only shot that could save him. He said there was no clean ending, only survival. He said if Cole had not acted, his wife and children would not be alive. The woman beside him began to cry. The children looked at Cole with wide eyes like they were looking at a legend, not a murderer. A heavy shame rolled through the room, because people realized how easy it was to judge from comfort, how easy it was to demand perfect choices from a man standing in blood and dust. Judge Miller looked down at the ledger again, then looked at Briggs and Pike. The weight of the evidence was crushing. He ruled that Briggs and Pike were guilty of corruption, theft, conspiracy, and aiding violent crime. He ordered them to be taken under federal custody when the marshal arrived. Briggs's face finally cracked. Pike's mouth curled with hate, but even he looked like a man realizing his game was finished. Before the judge could end the hearing, Ella stood. She did not stand with a soft voice or a bowed head. She stood straight, hands clasped, eyes moving over the whole town. The church felt smaller under her gaze, like everyone suddenly remembered she was the one who taught their children. She told them her name was Ella Hart, and she chose it. She told them she came here to build an honest life, and she worked for every piece of it. She said everyone carried a past, and using it as a weapon did not make anyone clean, it only spread poison. Then she looked at Cole and spoke the truth people had been ignoring. She said she had seen Cole choose restraint when he could have chosen cruelty. She said she had seen him choose protection over pride. She said he chose honesty even when it hurt him. She told the town what mattered was not what a person used to be, but who they were willing to become. When she finished, the church stayed silent for a breath. Then Martha Lee began to clap. It was slow, firm, and stubborn. Others joined, one by one, until applause filled the room like warm rain. Not everyone clapped, but enough did that the sound became a promise. Dusty Ford was not fully healed, but it was turning. That evening, the federal marshal arrived, hard-faced and humorless. Briggs and Pike were loaded into a barred wagon and taken away in a cloud of dust. The town watched them go like people watching a storm finally move off the horizon. The danger was leaving, but the damage would take time to mend. After the wagon disappeared, Cole found Ella at Cottonwood Creek. The water ran soft and steady, like it did not care about human trouble. Cole stood beside her for a long moment without speaking. When he finally spoke, he thanked her for what she said in the church. Ella replied that she only told the truth. Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. It was a land claim and a simple deed. He led her downstream to a small flat bend of land near the creek, with a few cottonwoods and good soil. In the center, a stake stood in the ground like a promise planted in earth. Ella stepped closer and saw words carved into the wood: Hart's School and Telegraph. Her breath caught so hard it hurt. Cole told her he put a deposit on it before the hearing, because no matter what happened, the town needed a teacher, and the teacher needed a place that belonged to her, not to Briggs, not to the council, not to anybody else. He said the land was hers if she wanted it. He did not offer her jewels. He offered her a foundation, a place where her work could grow and where her name could finally mean safety. Ella turned the deed in her hands, fingers trembling. For so long, her life had been borrowed rooms and temporary corners. No place that could not be taken away by a man with power. Now a man was offering her something solid, with no tricks in his eyes. Cole looked at her, and the same quiet sincerity from the barn was there again. He told her he meant what he said. If they could have a future, he wanted it to be built honest, not rushed, not forced. He asked if she would marry him when she was ready, not when fear pushed her into it. Ella's eyes filled, but she did not look away. She stepped close and placed her hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat under his shirt. Then she nodded. The wedding was simple and held at the new school site beside the creek, with a few benches set out and wildflowers in jars. Judge Miller, passing through again, spoke the vows. Martha baked a cake. The O'Malley children stood in front, clean-faced and proud, holding small bunches of grass and flowers like they were precious. Even Mrs. Gable came, quiet and stiff, but she came. And when Ella walked toward Cole, she did not look like a woman running anymore. She looked like a woman arriving. Life did not turn perfect overnight. The land was still harsh. The wind still came like it had teeth. But work began, steady and real. A small cabin rose near the creek. One half of it became a home. The other half became a bright schoolroom with big windows and a telegraph desk that gleamed in morning light. Soon, children's laughter mixed with the clicking of the telegraph key, and Dusty Ford sounded less like a lonely place and more like a town learning how to live. Months later, on a quiet evening when the prairie sky turned orange and gold, Cole slipped a simple silver band onto Ella's finger. Inside it, one word was etched. Choose. Cole told her he chose her every morning, not as a claim but as a promise. Ella rested her forehead against his and whispered that she chose him too, not because she needed saving, but because she wanted him beside her, equal and steady, in the life they were building. And when the lamp was turned down later, the world outside stayed wide and wild. But inside their small cabin by Cottonwood Creek, there was only peace earned the hard way, and love chosen on purpose.